Well, many of you have contacted me and indicated that you've missed some of the episodes that we have done. We've been doing True Crime Files of Los Angeles podcast for almost a year now, and I think there's almost 50 episodes that we've done. But some of you didn't see them at the very beginning because you missed them. And you've asked me, can you review or can you summarize? Can you give me an idea of the names of them? So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about some more. Last week we talked about the Hollywood cases. Today we'll talk about some of the Hollywood cases, but a lot of the ones that happen in other parts of Los Angeles County. So I think you'll find it fascinating. Some of these cases I did a lot of work on. We were able to put them together, and we were successful in them. So let's get started with the cases in review of Los Angeles Files of Los Angeles. Episode 2 is the Billionaire Boys Club. It's the case of Joe Hunt. Well, who was Joe Hunt? Well, he grew up in the San Fernando Valley, the north end of Los Angeles, and he did very well in school. He applied for the Harvard Preparatory School for high school, and even though he didn't have the money to get in there, he got a full scholarship. So it gave him an opportunity to go to Harvard Prep, and that's where all the rich and famous families sent their children. So he got to know all these rich kids from Beverly Hills and Bel Air. They admired him because he was brilliant, and he was energetic, and he was charismatic. Totally different than most of the rich kids who were kind of lazy. So after he finished college, he started various investments and eventually started what was called the Billionaire's Boys Club. And he brought in a lot of those classmates from Harvard Prep to work with him with it. And they did a lot of trading on the commodities exchange. And they also imported luxury cars from Europe and sold them at a high profit in Los Angeles. So his Billionaire Boys Club did very well at the beginning, but it was nothing more than really a Ponzi scheme, and he needed new money coming in to pay off the original investors. So he became desperate. He was losing money, and if he couldn't come up with money soon, he was going to lose everything. He met this gentleman in Beverly Hills, Ron Levine, and he had a number of Swiss bank accounts, and Joe learned about it. And he realized if he could only get Ron Levine to write him a check for $1.5 million, that would save his Billionaire's Boys Club. So he talked him into writing a check for him, but Joe knew he wasn't going to be able to pay it back. So he was going to have to kill Ron Levine. Well, anyway, get episode 2 and learn what Joe Hunt did. He was so bright. He was the brightest defendant I ever dealt with. And he had the perfect murder. He had planned it all out. There was nothing that could go wrong. But get episode 2 and you'll learn how such a brilliant person could do the dumbest thing. Episode 4 is titled The Killing of a Legend, The Death of Mickey Thompson, or better known as the Michael Goodwin case. Now, Mickey Thompson was an auto racer. Back in, I think it was 1960, he was up at Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah, and he went 406 miles an hour, set a record. He was the fastest man on wheels at the time, and he won many, many races over the years. And eventually he got into stadium racing, did very, very well at that. So, direct your attention to 1988. Mickey Thompson is walking around the side of his garage. They're leaving. His wife is backing out of the garage. And all of a sudden, Mickey Thompson's shot at the top of the garage driveway there. And he looks down and he sees somebody shooting at his wife. She's crawling down the driveway, and she's executed at the very bottom of the driveway. Both of them are maliciously killed right there, executed on their driveway. And This is in Bradbury Estates, very, very influential, affluent area of Los Angeles County. Why? Who would want to do it? No one is arrested. The case goes unsolved for years and years and years. And eventually, as far as the background on it, is that Mickey was into the stadium racing, but he wanted to kind of step away from that, retire or semi-retire. So he got into a partnership with Michael Goodwin, who did motocross racing in the stadiums. So the partnership, they started out doing a number of races, and Michael Goodwin is supposed to do the day-to-day operation, and he doesn't pay the bills. He doesn't pay the stadium. He doesn't pay the vendors. And Mickey said, wait, you got to pay people. And Goodwin says, we didn't make any money off of it. I'm not going to pay anybody. Mickey said, you still pay the people you owe money to. So out of his own pocket, Mickey paid the vendors in the stadium. It was only $514,000, as we say. It's chump change for either one of them. But Mickey says, hey, you owe this money. And Goodwin says, I will never pay you a dime. And he wouldn't. So Mickey took him to court. And the case went all the way up to the Supreme Court twice. And Goodwin lost every single time. Mickey won. This infuriated Goodwin. He didn't like losing, for certain. So that was what was going on. As I say, nothing happened until it was 2000. The case comes to me in Los Angeles County DA's office. And I was asked, look, Ron, review this. See if there's enough evidence to prosecute Goodwin. And for all these years, like 16 years, we hadn't done it. But I thought there was a way that we could go about doing it. Anyway, very, very intriguing case. And it turned out to be a sensational case because a lot of people were interested in it. That's episode 4. So check it out. The Mickey Thompson, Michael Goodwin case. Now, episode 18 is titled The Man Who Liked to Kill. Timothy McGee is the name of the case. And Timothy McGee was a Hispanic gang named the TOONERVILLE gang. And where does the name TOONERVILLE? That was a cartoon strip back in the 1940s. And the gang that lived in that area took the name TOONERVILLE. It was in the Atwater Village area of northeast Los Angeles. Now McGee, who is Irish, Scottish, he is the head of this Hispanic gang. Now it was a deadly, deadly gang involved in many homicides. He liked to kill the rival gang members, and he made sure that there were no witnesses to any of his crimes. And no one would even think of being a witness because they would be killed by him. So, very, very dangerous individual. And one evening, his members of the TOONERVILLE gang were committing a robbery in another part of town, and the police were called out, and the police went in pursuit of the TOONERVILLE members, and McGee is waiting for the police. And when the police come by their headquarters, he shoots at them. He shoots at the police car numerous times. One of the bullets went right through the door of the seal of Los Angeles City Police. So, very dangerous and very deadly. Now, one day a little bit later, it must have been, I'll say a month later, he was driving by in the area near Forest Lawn of Los Angeles, and they see a car, and he thinks it's a rival gang member in it, and he just starts shooting his AK at it and just makes Swiss cheese out of the car and kills one of the wives in the car. And In doing that, Timothy McGee, he drops his cell phone. His cell phone falls from his pocket and it slides under one of the parked cars. And it was dark out and he couldn't find it. So he asked a friend who was in the area, CRISTINA Duran, can you help me? Can you go back before the police get there and look for my cell phone? And she did. And as the police arrive, she gets in her car with McGee and they drive away, but they're stopped. And they do a little questioning. Not much happens out of that, but McGee, 3 days later, sets up a birthday party for CRISTINA Duran. And as she's pulling away from her birthday party, he comes up and he executes her in her car. Now, this is the lady 3 days before was trying to help him out so he wouldn't be caught by the police or his cell phone. So that's McGee. Anyway, fascinating case. That's episode 18. Timothy McGee, the man who liked to kill. Episode 30 is titled The Hispanic Gangs in California. We're going to talk about the Nostra Familia, which is the Northern California gang, but primarily we're going to talk about the Mexican Mafia, EMI, which is in Southern California. Now, they're what we call prison gangs, and the reason is that they operate from the prisons. Many of the cardinals, meaning the heads of the Mexican Mafia, are in Pelican Bay up in Northern California serving time. Sometimes they're in there for life. However, they're able to still control the Mexican Mafia all over the state. And they do it by what's called green lighting. And in a green light, and here below here, you can see that fine print. That's the names of all the individuals who have been green lighted by the cardinals who can be killed. And it's the obligation of every gang member to, if they come in contact with that individual, is to kill them. So that's what we call green lighting. And one of the main reasons for using it is to make sure that the drug dealers, narcotic dealers, pay their 10% to the Mexican Mafia. And that's how they sustain themselves, is that money. And they have to have it because obviously they can't make money since they're in prison. So here we have Gomez, who's working for the Mexican Mafia, and he gets in contact with this drug dealer down in San Pedro, California. And the drug dealer, says, no way am I going to pay 10% to the Mexican Mafia. No. And it wasn't too much later that Gomez walks in there with that shotgun and blows the head of that narcotic dealer, blow it away. So it sends a message to all other narcotic dealers. They better pay your 10% if you want to stay alive. So that's one of the reasons for green lighting. However, there's another, and that is territory. The cardinals decide as to which streets that people can sell drugs on or control. So if there's a territorial dispute, the person can be green lighted. If they're in the wrong territory, they don't belong there. The other part of green lighting is the prevention of informants. The one thing that the Mexican Mafia cannot exist if there's informants. So if anybody talks to the police, they're as good as dead. They will be green lighted, and that will be the obligation of any other gang member to kill that individual who has become an informant. Anyway, that's the green lighting, the Mexican Mafia. That's episode 30. Episode 33 is the murder on the road to Vegas. Better known as the Sean Hung and Benjamin Franson case. Well, what is it all about? Well, it involves a Sean Hung who is a graduate student trying to get his MBA from UCLA. And he's an entrepreneur. He wants to get into business, so he goes out into the San Fernando Valley and rents a house. And he takes the bedrooms and makes them into a cultivation room of marijuana. It was very profitable. It worked out very well. Made a lot of money. But he needed somebody to take care of the plants. So he hired an Israeli gentleman by the name of Ben Würzberger. He wanted to be a disc jockey, and he was over here working part-time. And he brought his friend over, Adar. So everything was working out fine. The marijuana was growing, and they were making money. Everybody was happy. However, all of a sudden, one morning they come in and everything is gone. All the marijuana has been taken. What happened? So Sean gets his friend, Benjamin Franzen. They get the two Israeli boys and they say, "Hey, what did you do? We think you took the marijuana. You stole it from us." And the Israelis say, "Hey, we don't know anything about it. We had nothing to do with it." Anyway, things got out of hand. And they ended up killing both the Israeli men. Wow. Well, now, what are you going to do with the bodies? Well, I didn't know what to do. So they get in the car, they put the bodies in the trunk, and they drive off to Las Vegas. And as they're driving along, they remembered they had gone to a rave concert out at a African Canyon campground. And so when they got to that road, they turned off and they went to the campground and they started digging a hole, a grave, a huge hole. And they buried the bodies of these two Israelis in it. Filled it up, covered it up. No one was ever going to find those bodies. It was out in nowhere, very isolated, where no one is going to notice anything askew. So everything worked out until the FBI stepped in and they started asking questions. And they came to that Franzen. And they asked him, "Do you know anything about these two Israelis who disappeared?" And he said, "No, I don't know anything about them, but if I were looking for somebody, I would look for a building with a blue roof with .com on it, just off the highway, the freeway, to Las Vegas." So the FBI think, "Well, what is that all about?" So they get in a helicopter and they fly along looking for a blue-roofed building next to the freeway to Vegas. And they see this. It's an old real estate office with a .com sign on top. And they check it out. Sure enough. And there's a campground right near it. Afton Canyon Campground. So they go over there and they start checking out. And they can't find any grave. They can't find any hole. They can't find anything that would indicate that bodies had been buried there. So they were going to give up, but the next day they said, "Oh, let's get a cadaver dog." And they got this cadaver dog, and he came out, sniffed around, didn't seem to find anything. Then he went to the far east side of the campground, and he started digging. And one of the FBI agents got a shovel and started digging, where the dog was. And sure enough, he came across a shoe and a leg. It was the bodies of both of the Israeli men had been buried right there. If you want to know more about it, fascinating. That's episode 33, Murder on the Road to Vegas. Episode 48 is titled The Mysterious Death of Thelma Todd. Now, she was a movie star in, maybe the late 20s, the early 30s, with the silent movies at the beginning, but then she did talkies. She did a number of comic roles with the Marx Brothers and Laurel and Hardy. Did very, very well and made a lot of money. And she was able to buy a restaurant. It was called Thelma's Cafe, Pacific Coast Highway, just off the beach in Pacific Palisades. It was a restaurant, a bar where everybody wanted to be seen. Tourists would come to have dinner there. And eventually she put in a casino up above on the top floor where a lot of people enjoyed playing cards. Even though it was illegal, to gamble at that time. She was living there with Roland West, who was a producer of one of her movies. So they were a couple that lived above the restaurant, and everything was going fine. And then one day, Lucky Luciano called her up and said, I want to buy your cafe and your casino. And Thelma's response was, "You'll get the cafe over my dead body." And Luciano said, "That can be arranged." What did he mean by that? Well, several weeks later, she ended up dead in her car in her garage. How did she die? Carbon monoxide, poisoning from the exhaust of the car. She was in it all by herself for an entire weekend. Well, it turned out to be one of those titillating Hollywood stories that fascinated people. It was one of those mysteries because no one was ever prosecuted. But there were many, many suspects in the Thelma Todd murders. Well, that's episode 48. Episode number 49 is titled Roman Polanski, Child Predator, or Talented Film Director. There's no question he's the world's most famous fugitive of all times. And what is it all about? Well, back in 1977, Roman Polanski, he was asked to do a photo shoot for Vogue magazine. And he lined up a 13-year-old model and had her available to go with him up to Jack Nicholson's place up in Mulholland Drive to take photos of her. And in order to get her into the right mood, he gave her Quaaludes and a couple glasses of champagne, and then directed her to get in the jacuzzi so he could take some pictures of her. He gets in the jacuzzi and says, take your clothes off, and she does. And they do that for maybe, a half hour, 45 minutes, and she kind of gets tired of that, then gets a towel and gets out, walks into the bedroom, and he follows her into the bedroom, and as she gets her, he pushes her down on the bed, and he starts having intercourse with her. And there was oral copulation. All sorts of sex acts takes place on the bed there. She didn't know what to do. She was 13 years old. She went along with it, didn't complain. It wasn't something that she had anticipated or was interested in. He takes her home after the photo shoot, and she gets on the phone and talks to a friend of hers, and her mother overhears what took place up there at that photo shoot of Roman Polanski. The mother was livid, and she calls up the police, and a report is taken, and eventually Roman Polanski is arrested for the rape, sodomy, and oral copulation. And the case is in court, and they're trying to work out a disposition, and it was agreed that he could plead to an unlawful sex of a minor, and the other charges would be dismissed. But first he had to go out and serve 90 days at the state prison in Chino, called a diagnostic study. And he agreed to it. He went out there, and he was there for only 47 days. And he's released. And when the judge found out he didn't serve the 90 days, the judge was livid. And Roman Polanski realized he was in trouble. So he gets on the first plane to France, and he flies out. And he becomes a fugitive for the rest of his life. This is all about. It's gone on for, 46 years, a long time. And will it ever be resolved? Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, that's episode number 49. Episode 50 is titled The Michael Jackson's Death, better known as the Dr. Conrad Murray case. Well, I think all of you have heard about it. You all know who Michael Jackson is, and you know about his death. And the facts leading up to it was that Michael had been prosecuted up in Santa Barbara for child molestation. He beaten that case, but he lost all his money, or his liquid money, and he needed money very badly. And there was an offer that came in 2009 for him to do the London tour in the O2 Arena. All he had to do was 10 concerts. He'd make huge amount of money, and that would tide him over. The tickets went on sale in less than an hour. They were all sold out. So the production company, AEG, decided, let's do 50. We'll do 50 concerts, make a ton of money. And so now they start rehearsing. And the name of this new production was This Is It, his new comeback. But Michael was very weak. I think he only weighed about 98 pounds. He showed up at the rehearsal that night very late. He rehearsed for maybe 2 hours and said, I want to go home. I'm tired. He gets home, and one of the arrangements that he had worked out with AEG, the production company, was they had to hire a doctor that would give him whatever medication he needed to sleep. Michael's problem was sleeping. He couldn't sleep at night. So they hired this Dr. Murray for $150,000 per month to give him whatever drugs he needed to get sleep. Now, Michael liked propofol. It was a drug that's used in surgery. It knocks the person out. It's very effective. It's very, very good. However, it requires very close monitoring of the person's heart rate, their heartbeat, their breathing, and all sorts of things. So the doctor gave him the propofol, and he fell asleep. So everything was going fine. And it was getting mid-morning, and the doctor wanted to go to the restroom. And he got up, he took his phone with him, and he went to the restroom, and he started calling some of his girlfriends. He was married and had, I think, 10 or 11 children. But he had a girlfriend who was a stripper, and had another girlfriend who was a bartender in Vegas, another who was up in the Bay Area. So he calls all of his girlfriends and wishes them a happy day. And he talks to them for a total of 47 minutes. And then he returns to the bedroom and finds that Michael is not breathing. He's lifeless. And he tries to do CPR on him. Well, I don't have to tell you much more. You all know what happened to Michael. But I don't know if you know the facts of the case. But get episode 50 and you will be fascinated. It is sensational and very provocative as to what the doctor did and how did that kill Michael. Episode 50. Episode 57 is titled You Can Run But You Can't Hide, the Gerald Mason case. Well, what are the facts of that case? Well, it goes back to 1957. There were two El Segundo police officers who were patrolling. It was around midnight, and they see this car on Sepulveda run a red light. And so they turn on their red lights, and they pull that car over, and they stop them. And the person stops, and they're writing a citation. Just a traffic citation for running a red light. The man turns around. He's got a gun. And he shoots both police officers right there. They're standing on the side of their police car. Well, the case goes unsolved. All they have are two partial prints on the steering wheel. But they couldn't run it through the database because everything had to be done by hand back there in 1957. So there wasn't anything they could do. 40 years later, the Sheriff's Department started using computers with latent prints. And they took those two partial prints And with the computer, they were able to make a composite print, and they put it through the database. And it came back to a Gerald Mason in South Carolina. Wow. Now they had something. Well, the case ended up on my desk, and I was told, take the facts, see what you can make out of it. And I helped put together this composite of all the evidence that pointed to this Gerald Mason, even though it was over 40 years later. But take a look at this. It was a very captivating case, and I was so impressed with what the Sheriff's Department was able to do. That's episode 57. Episode 66 is titled The Hollywood Mob, and involves Bugsy Siegel, Mickey Cohen, Johnny Stoppanato, as well as Lana Turner. Well, the New York mob, under the leadership of Lucky Luciano, knew there was a lot of money to be made out in Hollywood. So they sent Bugsy Siegel out to Hollywood to organize things, especially with the motion picture studios. And he did it, and it was very, very successful. And they were in control. And then they instructed him to go up to Las Vegas and see if they could organize gambling, because it was legal to gamble in Nevada. So he goes up there and he starts this Flamingo casino hotel, and it had some problems at the beginning, and eventually started operating for several months. He came back to Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, and he was staying at his girlfriend's house, and he's reading the newspaper one evening, and all of a sudden he's shot. Bugsy Siegel is shot. And it was a mob hit. They somehow thought he was skimming off the top of the casino, and he wasn't giving all the money to the mafia. Now, his lieutenant was Mickey Cohen, and Mickey Cohen wasn't kind of as smooth as Bugsy Siegel, and there was a lot of violence, especially on the Sunset Strip. This was his nightclub, Sherry's, and the city fathers of Los Angeles got sick and tired of all the violence of Mickey Cohen, and he was prosecuted for tax fraud, and he was convicted of that. And his right-hand man was Johnny Stoppanato. And Johnny Stoppanato, he had a liking for attracting women, movie stars, and he hooked up with Lana Turner, and seemed to be a good match. They lived together there in Lana Turner's house there, but there was some arguments, some parting of the ways. And then one night, Lana Turner's daughter heard the couple arguing up in the bedroom. She got a butcher's knife. She went in there and she stabbed the Johnny Stoppanato, the head man of the mafia in Los Angeles, and killed him right there in Lana Turner's house. Well, it's an interesting story. The Hollywood mob, it came to Hollywood, and it finally ended in Lana Turner's bedroom. And that is episode 66. Number 69 is titled, Does Crime Pay? The John DeLorean Case. Well, most people have heard of DeLorean. John DeLorean worked in Detroit, manufacturing cars. He started with the Packard Motor Car Company and went over to General Motors, and he worked with the Pontiac, the GTO. It was a muscle car, and people were really impressed with it. Eventually, he developed the Firebird, and everybody liked the sports car. And then he did over in Chevrolet with the Impala, and eventually he took care of the Corvair, which was a real problem for Chevrolet. He was a genius when it came to manufacturing and producing cars. Now, during this period of time, he met CRISTINA FERRARE. She was a model, personality, very attractive, and they got married. And there's no question she was a trophy wife. And they had children. They lived in a number of estates throughout the United States and even in Europe. Later on, John DeLorean decided he wanted to build a sports car, but he wanted to have it more efficient, cheaper, and he developed the DeLorean DCM-12, meaning he was planning to sell it for $12,000. Didn't quite work out, sold for almost double that, but where to manufacture it? Northern Ireland, which is part of England, decided to give £100 million to him and his company if they would establish the plant near Belfast, Northern Ireland, which he did. And it was very successful. They produced a lot of cars. However, there was a recession that came and he couldn't sell them. He couldn't sell the cars. And what is he going to do? To save the company, he had to find a way to make money fast. Somebody talked him into getting involved in drug transactions, and he was able to come up with $24 million in cash, and he was able to meet with a drug dealer and buy cocaine. And he's setting it all up, and it was going to save the DeLorean company. Then as soon as they passed the money and he got the drugs, all the FBI agents came out of all these doors and closets in this hotel room. He's arrested, and he's prosecuted, and he's tried in court. It, without a doubt, was one of the most sensational cases during the time. And it was astonishing what happened in that case. So get my episode 69. I think that you're going to be very fascinated as to how it turned out. Well, hopefully this review of the True Crime Files of Los Angeles podcast has been informative as well as interesting for you. Now you know the names of the episodes, the names of the cases we talked about, and you can look at them on YouTube at your leisure. So that will bring you up to date as to the various podcasts that we've done over the past year. So hopefully you'll join us next week when we will do one more review of the cases that maybe you've seen or maybe you've missed. See you then.